Back in the year of 1995, a small independent developer by the name of Millennium Interactive wanted to create a game that combined elements of a Zelda-esque action-adventure with the art style of Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. The result was an interesting mix of Halloween-themed visuals, coupled with all the intensity of a hack-and-slash platformer. During production, the developers soon realised that in order for their game to be a success, they needed a unique lead character, someone with an unusual appearance to match their equally bizarre and vivid gothic setting. This character needed to be visually endearing to pull players into a world filled with hysterical scarecrows, rotting zombies, and possessed villagers. And who better to take charge than an undead knight? MediEvil Sir Daniel Fortesque was created by artist Jason Wilson. In very early drawings of the character, Dan was made to appear as this large, bulky knight with a skull that was disproportionately small to the rest of his body. As the design went through several stages and evolved, it was decided that Dan would be more intriguing if he had no jaw, and Wilson settled for a smaller, lanky body that would be better suited for a bumbling skeleton. For Dan's teeth, he took inspiration from the horror film Basket Case 2, which included a scene of this freak of nature. Thanks to the animations of Mitch Phillips, as well as the pre-rendered sequences by Jason Riley, Dan was brought to life, and although his design was met with positive reception by Western audiences, the studio's Japanese partners insisted Dan's head be covered. Not because they thought he was too ugly, but at the time, the studio was worried Japanese audiences would regard Dan's skeletal appearance as an evil spirit rather than an unwieldy hero. Thus, a helmet became an integral part of his design in the Japan version of the game. It appeared in all the cutscenes, though it could be removed in-game if the player decided they wanted it gone. Despite this little hiccup, the developers seem to have struck gold with a unique but memorable look for our undead hero, but appearance is only half the equation. The writers needed to give Dan an interesting backstory in order to complete his character. Eventually an idea surfaced to have Dan be a pompous failure in life, whose resurrection was his one shot at redemption. This distinctive plotline gave Dan's character a much needed purpose outside the bare bones good versus evil trope typically found in games of the PS1 era. Essentially, in life, Dan was a bombastic storyteller who captured the king's favour with marvellous tales of slaying dragons and vanquishing hordes of enemies. For his part in weaving together a few riveting tales, the king knighted Dan and put him in charge of the royal battalion. It was only an honorary position, however, granted during a time when the kingdom of Galamere was enjoying a century of peace and prosperity. Nothing of real significance was expected of Dan. That was until an army began marching towards Castle Peregrine, led by none other than the king's very own court magician, Zarok. The king, desperate for a champion, turned to the one person he had faith in to inspire and lead his men, Daniel Fortesque. Dan accepted the task and in 1286 commanded a brave charge against Zarok's legions, which immediately led to his death in the first few moments of the battle. In youth, Dan had trained with the best swordsmiths in the land, showing a degree of natural talent, but never worked to refine and master his skills. Ultimately, his laziness meant that he couldn't unlock his full potential, and left him vulnerable and unprepared for war. Within seconds Dan fell, struck in the eye by an arrow in the first volley. The army was left to carry on the fight without him, and while they were able to drive back Zarok's horde, the sorcerer himself escaped. Embarrassed by Dan's pitiful performance, and troubled by Zarok's disappearance, King Peregrine fabricated a story about Dan to give his people a symbol to believe in. Tales were sung throughout the kingdom of how Sir Fortesque spearheaded the charge and destroyed Zarok utterly before succumbing to his wounds. A hero's tomb was erected to honour the memory of Dan, and history books were written with accounts of his unquestionable valour. 100 years passed, and then the sorcerer returned. Intending to take over Galamere again, Zarok resorted to using a powerful spellbook, this time to steal the souls of the townspeople and resurrect his undead army. Unfortunately for him, he also unwittingly brought back Dan, who retained his free will.
It has risen again. Sir Daniel Fortesque, see? The hero of Gallowmere who fell at the first charge. The fog of war and the shrouds of time conspire to turn the arrow fodder into the saviour of the day. But we knows better. Let it alone. Fate has given it a second chance. A chance to forget the ignoble truth. A chance to defeat Zarok and live up to the legend. We hopes it does well.
When Dan was alive, he was a fraud and a coward who obtained his fortune and status through luck. His posthumous rise to fame was through no meaningful action of his own. But now that he has returned as an undead skeleton, he's been given an opportunity to finally earn his status as a hero for real. And he does. He embarks on a perilous journey through graveyards, ice caves, insane asylums, and haunted ruins, facing wave after wave of murderous creatures. One good thing about being a reanimated skeleton is that he's no longer susceptible to the same weaknesses of his feeble living self. He's come back with strength and durability to tackle the enormous task ahead of him. His movements and sword swings are still clumsy, lacking the finesse of a true swordsman, but what he lacks in battle skill, he makes up for in agility and stamina. He is capable of taking hits now without rolling over, and can even rip off his arm and throw it around like a boomerang. As Dan acquires more weapons, such as bows, hammers, and spears over time, his true battle prowess shines through. His journey is not without struggle, however, and many gargoyles and fellow heroes consider him as nothing more than an incompetent fool who's not up to the challenge. Dan dislikes being reminded of his past failure, especially by some of the heroes who berate him for it. The Hall of Heroes is a unique location in the first game, where champions from history spend their time feasting, drinking, and arm wrestling. Upon collecting the bonus chalices scattered throughout Gallowmere, Dan can make trips to the hall to receive a powerful weapon and spiritual guidance from these heroes' designated statues. Dan doesn't get a whole lot of respect from them because in life he never really earned it. While he certainly had at least one moment of bravery in leading the charge against Zarok, it doesn't come naturally to him, and throughout all the games he does have a tendency to show cowardice. MediEvil Resurrection places much more emphasis on this trait by expanding on his backstory through exposition and characterizing him as the ultimate fake and coward. In many ways, his entire quest can be encapsulated as a journey towards him discovering his own inner courage. Dan is not inherently a brave person. He wasn't one to instinctually jump into dangerous situations without considering the risk to life and limb. We see him come up against monsters that truly terrify him, but he learns to take action in spite of his fears. Courage is knowing full well that something will be dangerous or hard, but doing it anyway, and that's what Dan does. By the end of the game, he proves all his skeptics wrong. He challenges Zarok, who had taken on a monstrous form, and after a great battle, Dan emerges victorious. Zarok tries to take our main character down with him by unleashing a spell to topple his lair, but Dan manages to get away. He returns to his crypt, now at peace with himself. Impressed with his heroism, the gargoyles grant Dan permanent spiritual access to the Hall of Heroes, where the ghostly outline of his statue becomes solid. The other heroes then applaud Dan for his courage. The camera zooms out of the hall and into the sky, where it shows a constellation of Dan standing heroically, ready for any challenge. And that is what I call a perfect ending to Dan's arc. No longer the charlatan he was in life, he's now the genuine article. He is a hero. MediEvil saw a massive success when it released in time for Halloween 1998. It was inevitable that it would get a sequel, and in April 2000, MediEvil 2 came out, allowing players to control Dan yet again, but this time in a completely different time period and setting. By the year 1886, Dan's remains were moved to a British museum in Kensington, London. He was resurrected by a ruthless industrialist, Lord Palethorn, who had come into possession of Zarek's spellbook. Dan was soon recruited by Professor Hamilton Kift to help tackle this new threat. During the mission to restore peace, Dan fell in love with an Egyptian princess by the name of Kia, fought monsters throughout London, collected chalices, and even travelled through time. Finally, he corners Palethorn and triumphs over the ambitious tycoon and his allies. Dan's character is much the same as he was in MediEvil 1. He's quirky, at times clumsy, but fiercely loyal to his friends. He also seems to be able to string a few more words together than before. Unfortunately, Dan isn't really given much in the way of motivation other than to save the girl and defeat the bad guy. Here, he's a slave to the narrative rather than being the vehicle that drives the story. In the previous title, Dan is the underdog who sets out to prove his mettle and make amends for his dishonourable death. MediEvil 1 included engaging themes of redemption and courage, while MediEvil 2's ideas aren't as captivating. Now don't get me wrong, I adore MediEvil 2. I think it's a fun, solid game with an awesome Victorian era setting to explore. Hell, I still find myself playing it occasionally on the PS1 emulator on my phone. It's just I feel MediEvil 1 did a better job setting up a character with a compelling motivation that audiences could rally behind. As viewers, we like to root for the underdog because we better relate to characters who have something to prove. Now, this is not to say that Dan doesn't go through any sort of catharsis in MediEvil 2's story. He does. In fact, the biggest moment for his character is when Kia is murdered by the Ripper. Witnessing her death completely shatters his resolve. He blames himself for not saving her in time and cannot bring himself to continue the mission against Palethorn. Leaving a pleading Professor Hamilton to his own devices, Dan descends into the sewers to grieve. He does eventually snap out of it when he discovers the existence of a time machine, allowing him to fix the past and save Kia.
Mercy, honourable knight, spare me.
Just like the first game, MediEvil 2 has a lot going for it, with its light-hearted humour, but its story never quite reaches the same heights of its predecessor. Sadly, we never got a MediEvil 3, though apparently a concept was pitched during the PS2's lifetime by creator Chris Sorrell. Although a third game wasn't meant to be, Dan's legacy lived on through the 2005 PSP remake of the first game, and then later on in the 2019's PS4 remake of the same game. A comic titled MediEvil Fate's Arrow came out on the 25th of October 2019 to align with the release of the PS4 title. The comic served as a prequel and a sequel following the events of Dan after the ending of MediEvil 2, as he travels backwards through time and encounters his original living self a day before the Battle of Gallowmere. After Palethorn's demise, Dan and Kia decide to travel through time using the Professor's time machine. However, the machine malfunctioned and the couple were tragically separated. Dan gets quite the out-of-body experience as he observes the man he once was. He can hardly believe that the man before him is none other than himself, as the comic reveals original Dan to be the sleazy, spoiled brat who selfishly became a knight to impress maidens and live a comfortable life. Basically, the plot revolves around Dan helping Gallowmere's fairies to preserve the flow of history. He ends up swapping bodies with his former self to boost the morale of the king's army by giving a rousing speech before heading into battle and dying again to the first arrow fired, effectively completing and restarting his journey. This act condemns Dan to a never-ending cycle of humiliating deaths and heroic endeavours, where he will forever beat Palethorn, then travel backwards through time, only to end up each time sacrificing himself at the Battle of Gallowmere. My biggest gripe with this ending is that it completely undermines Dan's growth from MediEvil 1. If we are to accept the Fate Arrows comic as canon, then the Sir Dan that we have been following from the beginning, who first sets off to fight Zarek to redeem himself for his failure, is not the cowardly Captain Fortesque, but a self-made hero that is always destined to repeat the same series of events. It ruins the whole redemption arc that Sir Dan supposedly has in the first game, to the point where he no longer has anything to redeem himself for. Time travel is one of the easiest plot devices to screw up, because if poorly handled, not only does it potentially create paradoxes that are impossible to resolve, but they can also needlessly undo all the backstory that makes up an excellent, well-rounded character. I realise MediEvil doesn't have the best track record when introducing time travel elements into its narrative. I mean, just look at how MediEvil 2 tries to resolve the paradox of two Fortesques running around. They literally have the past and future Dans shake hands and fuse to create a single Super Dan in shining gold armour. While MediEvil 2 does get a pass from me here because the plot isn't supposed to be taken that seriously, I have to say Fate's Arrow crosses a line by wasting Dan's original character arc. Now, you may have a different opinion. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree about the ending of Fate's Arrow. Also, I'm keen to hear your thoughts about Dan's character overall. For me, I would have been thrilled to have seen a remake of MediEvil 2 released together with the 2019 game. Who knows, that may have paved the way for future installments. As always, like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want more MediEvil content, and I'll catch you next time.